Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to be rhetorically analyzing President John F. Kennedy's inaugural speech. Now, this speech is teeming and brimming and spilling over with rhetorical devices and rhetorical techniques. So we're just going to scratch the surface today on the rhetoric that President John F. Kennedy used in his famous inaugural speech. So without further ado, let's set the scene. So it was a frigid Friday morning of January 20th, 1961. They were positioned on the east front of the White House, and the world watched in awe as the new leader of the free world was being inducted into office. He was standing in front of a clerk of court of the United States Supreme Court who was holding the Bible that had seen many generations of his family. John Fitzgerald Kennedy stood there with no top coat, despite the frigid temperatures, waiting anxiously to deliver the speech of his lifetime and utter words that would essentially define a generation. Even now, 2.5 generations after the speech, it is still revered as one of the most effective, rhetorically speaking, and iconic presidential speeches or speeches ever since President Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. Next, just some more historical context. As I stated before, it was January 20th, 1961. The president-elect JFK previously represented the state of Massachusetts in both the Senate and the House of Representatives prior to his victory as president. So he was no stranger to politics. He already had a support group that followed him from his time in Congress, and he knew how things worked. Let's just put it like that. President John F. Kennedy ran on the same ticket as Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson, and they had beat the Republican incumbent Vice President Richard Nixon in both the electoral and the popular vote. So it was a 303 to 219, excuse me, 303 to 219 electoral college victory, and they won the national popular vote by a margin of 0.17%. So it was a very, very tight race. Um, John Fitzgerald Kennedy was the United States' youngest president to have ever been sworn into office. His presidential debates were the first to be televised in all of American history. So this will play a big role in how he delivers speeches because of this new pressure to be more likable and more telegenic, so to speak. And possibly the most historical context of all was that the United States was amid a stalemate in the Cold War with the Soviet Union. So tensions were rising because of the USSR stockpiling of nuclear weapons. And as we're going to see, his speech reflects that as he mentions um, the tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union. So just some more context, speech overview. The entire speech was only 1,364 words, which is significantly shorter than the average word count for inaugural speeches. This was not fortuitous, though. This was by design. He worked closely with his advisor and speechwriter, Ted Sorensen, to create the speech as concise as possible. And the reason he did this is because he had already set into motion his image construction through debates and campaigning. So he wanted to be seen as the almost like your neighbor next door. He wanted to be seen as just any other American who just has a platform um to enact more significant change than the common American. So he wanted to be seen as likable because of the newfound pressure that television brought. Um, and he was no stranger to television. So Ted Sorensen, his speechwriter and close friend, actually wrote a memoir after President Kennedy's assassination that went into detail about their approach and their speechwriting process. So he wrote that for all of their speeches, including the inaugural speech, he and the late president never valued pompous composition, linguistics, or semantics. Instead, they focused on audience comprehension and comfort. So this was obviously seen in the inaugural speech that we're about to dissect. And the reason for this is because they wanted their speeches to be able to be comprehended by the common working class American. And also there's often a disconnect between the audience and an individual of societal stature, uh, because it almost seems as if the speech giver is speaking down to the people as opposed to saying, hey, we're all on the same playing field, we're all equal. So Sorensen and Kennedy actually valued this, and it is evident in the speech. So it's evident through short, palatable sentences, prematurely broken ideas signified by dashes, easy to understand vocabulary, balanced clauses, repetition, and a very distinct rhythm and cadence. So he basically just wanted to achieve something that resembled a conversation between um, you and your friend, or you and your neighbor, as I said before. So let's get into the actual meat of the speech. So the opening. These are the very first two sentences of the entire speech. So it reads, "We observe today not a victory of party, but a celebration of freedom, symbolizing an end as well as a beginning, signifying renewal as well as change. For I have sworn before you and Almighty God the same solemn oath our forebears prescribed nearly a century and 3/4 ago." So this is a very strong opening. And as we dissect it, we see that he talks about um, an end as well as a beginning, signifying renewal as well as change. These almost seem antonymous. They seem like they would be the opposite of each other, but this is by design. This is a rhetorical strategy to reach across party lines and just kind of gather both the people who value renewal as well as a commitment to culture and heritage and conservatism and antiquity and tradition. So aside from that, the very first word of the opening is just probably the most important of this. We. As I said before, he was not trying to come off too pompous or pretentious. So by saying we, he's putting himself on the same playing field as the Americans. He's not speaking down to them. And we'll see this throughout the entirety of the speech. So nods to nuclear warfare. As I stated before, excuse me, as I stated before, uh, it was very unique times in the United States right now. They were in a stalemate with the USSR because they're stockpiling of nuclear weapons. And this newfound fear struck the American people because for the first time in history, there was this threat of nuclear war and ultimate demise for the entire world. So he plays on that using ad metum, which is a logical fallacy that appeals to fear. So the world is very different now, for man holds in his mortal hands the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life. So the all forms of human life is obviously a nod to nuclear warfare here. So so what ad metum is more specifically is a common fallacy used to unite and persuade an audience uh, to believe in a certain ideal in fear of the alternatives. So basically he's saying that with me you'll be safe, either you support me and my legislation that I'm going to pass, or the alternative is nuclear warfare. So he's basically using this fear of the American people to lay out his policy for the next 4 years. Patriotic pandering is next. So we dare not forget today that we are the heirs of that first revolution. Let the word go forth from this time and place to friend and foe alike, that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans. Born in this century, tempered by war, disciplined by a hard and bitter peace, proud of our ancient heritage, and unwilling to witness or permit the slow undoing of those human rights to which this nation has always been committed, and to which we are committed today at home and around the world. So this is a common thing that presidents do in their speeches. They compare the days of now to the days of 1776. This is basically just to incite a sense of um, unity through their Americanness, and also um, a patriotic country and a nationalistic country is typically one that supports the president. So um, he does this to unite his audience to support him. He's getting them riled up, we're Americans. And this is also a claim of value too. So he's saying that it's good, it's almost good or right to be patriotic and nationalistic and have pride in one's country. So repetitions and claims of policy. In this section, he's basically laying out his policy for the next 4 years, and he uses repetition to hammer these ideals home, which is a very common rhetorical tactic. So it's a total of 7 times that he uses some version or form of the words "we pledge," "this much we pledge," and more. We pledge the loyalty of our friends, we pledge our word, we pledge our best efforts, we offer a special pledge, we renew our pledge of support, we offer not a pledge but a request. So he's basically speaking to the rest of the world, saying what he and the citizens of the United States would do to achieve world peace. So he's basically laying out their responsibility, their policy that they're going to enact to achieve this world peace. Because of the mounting tensions, world peace was very much a hope for everyone in the world. So after this section, we see a shift in his speech. So between the 13th and 14th paragraphs in his speech, a shift occurs. Before, he was pledging that the initiatives the United States were going to take to achieve world peace. So starting with the 14th paragraph, he begins to offer ideas to the other nations of the world to adopt to achieve world peace. He does so by using the phrase "let us" a total of 7 times, which is the same amount of times that he used the words "we pledge." So it's all about balance, it's all about congruence, and it's all about continuity for President John F. Kennedy. And this is a strong rhetorical device. So next we have another claim of policy. He says, "Together, let us explore the stars." So he is foreshadowing his efforts to send the first Americans to the moon. He eventually made the announcement to pursue the endeavor on May 25th, 1961. So it's rhetorically meant to comfort and offer solace to the American people that they would win the space race versus the Soviet Union. And eventually, as we know, his promise was technically kept. On July 20th, 1969, the United States became the first country to ever successfully land humans on the surface of the moon. As I said, this is a claim of policy because he was almost like sending out feelers to his audience. If they would have reacted badly to the idea that he wanted to send people to the moon, then he probably wouldn't have. But it was genuinely generally well received. So he sent people to explore the stars, as he said. He kept his promise. So next we see a call to action, which is another common rhetorical strategy. So this is after another shift that occurs. President JFK concludes this section that addresses the leaders of other nations. He starts this section with words actually borrowed from President Abraham Lincoln. So he says, "In your hands, my fellow citizens, more than mine, will rest the final success or failure of our course." So once again, he's almost minimizing his stature in American society and culture, and he's basically offering an inversion of roles and responsibilities to the audience. So he's basically essentially saying that, you know, you as Americans are more powerful than I can ever be because there's strength in numbers, and I'm only the one representing you. You voted me into office. You have more power than me. So this is all, as I said before, the newfound um, effort to be likable and well received by an audience as a result of television playing a big role in society now. So this is all because of that. So we see more calls to action. Now the trumpet summons us again. Join in that historic effort. Americans answered the call to service around the globe. So he's basically just rallying these Americans, hyping them up. Are you going to step up to the responsibilities that our forefathers left us of being Americans, being proud Americans, um, being active in our communities and all that? Are we going to fight for world peace and promote that ideal to everyone we meet, shout it from the rooftops, essentially? She's basically, um, yeah, just hyping his audience up. And finally, the quote heard around the world. Now, this quote essentially defined a generation. I'm sure everyone is familiar with this quote. So this is the end, essentially the end of his speech and the section where he's uniting the country and pumping a sense of nationalism into them. So he says, "And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." Now, this quote essentially canonized President John F. Kennedy. Um, so if this entire speech was a roller coaster at a theme park, the whole speech would be like ticking upwards and upwards and upwards. This would be like the peak before it just like slides home and everyone is just losing their heads. So this was like the big get for President John F. Kennedy. And he's doing this, he's inciting this sense of nationalism and fervor into Americans because involved citizens who support their president are citizens that would be more likely to approve of President John F. Kennedy's legislation in his time of office, excuse me. So he recognizes that um, if the American citizens are on his side and that they're supportive of him, that he will be able to achieve more with little to no pushback from the American people. Finally, we have President JFK's usage of the Toolman model. So his claims were the promises of world peace, victory in the space race, unity, and national prosperity. These are all the things that he promised throughout his speech. The grounds were the policy he intends to enact while in office. Warrant: presidents have the power to influence the state of the country with policy. Backing: this warrant was proved by the 34 prior presidents in office before JFK. Rebuttal and qualification: I'm going to be honest, I actually had trouble with recognizing parts of the Toolman model in his speech, and I thought it was just me, so I did some research, and I saw 5 or 6 sources actually say that he didn't even use the Toolman model. He used another form of speech writing or structurization. But I think I was successful in finding at least claims, grounds, warrant, and backing. But rebuttal and qualification, essentially an inaugural speech is meant to like almost sell a dream. They're selling themselves. They're uh, speaking to the people who voted for them, making them even more excited for what's to come. And they're also speaking to the rest of the world and the people who didn't vote for him to try to get them on their side. So if he were to offer a rebuttal or a qualification, it would almost um be not as well received as the intended argument would not be as well received because it's almost like planting seeds of doubt into the heads of these individuals. So he wanted to keep it all happy and just positive and kind of ignore the possibilities of his claims not working out. So I feel like that's pretty common in presidential speeches or inaugural speeches at least. So here's my works cited. And yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching. This was really fun. I'm a real nerd for like 50s, 60s America, so this is actually a joy for me to do. And JFK is probably my favorite president. So this was very enjoyable. Thank you guys, or thank you, Professor Katie. You are an amazing professor. Okay, bye.